finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
Hi, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of BS Free MD, where we like to dig into the real, raw conversations to help you live a healthier and more purposeful life. And today, I'm thrilled to bring we are bringing you a conversation with a guest whose wisdom and heart for transformation has inspired millions. Morgan Cron is our guest. He is a best-selling author, psychotherapist, Enneagram teacher, Episcopal priest, and host of the wildly popular Typology podcast, which has over 28 million downloads. I first heard about Ian when a friend of mine were on a road trip to Napa, and she introduced me to his book on the Enneagram, and I was hooked ever since on that. You might remember us sharing that we were recently had the honor of being guests on his show Typology, and we explored our own Enneagram types. And after that fun experience, we knew we wanted to bring Ian onto BS Free MD just to keep the conversation going and let him talk about his projects and books. So Ian's new book is called The Fix: How the 12 Steps Offer a Surprising Path of Transformation for the Well-Adjusted, the Down and Out, and everyone in between. It's being released January 28th, 2025. And this book is deeply personal, rooted in his 30-plus year recovery journey. And it offers a fresh perspective on the 12 steps, not just as a tool for addiction recovery, but as a blueprint for anyone seeking meaningful change. And so we can't wait to dive into Ian's journey, the lessons from his upcoming book, and how the timeless principles in 12 steps really can help anyone unlock a more purposeful, fulfilling life. And of course, some Enneagram questions. So here we go. Welcome, Ian, to the show. This is like a fan moment for me having you on our show here. So we're both super excited.
Well, I'm super stoked to be here. I enjoy both of you very much.
So we're going to start, and I want to start really with your personal story and the conversation about your recovery journey and the 12 steps. And can you let's just start and share, the experiences and what was going on that led you up to that point and what the sort of earlier days of your recovery looked like?
So I first got sober in 1987, right? I was 27 years old, newly married. I'd had a drinking problem for probably since, oh man, it's hard to know when you cross the meridian, right? But late high school, college, and then it accelerated through my 20s until I reached a point where it's like, I went to a therapist and he was in recovery, and he looked at me after about one or two sessions. And he said, you're an alcoholic, right? Like, you know that, right? And I'm like, and actually at first I was furious, right? Like, I was just furious. Anne Lamott has this great quote. She says, trying to reason with an alcoholic is like trying to blow out a light bulb. And I'm like, I just stormed out of his office, you know what I said, F you, I'm out of here, right? Like right. I'm not an alcoholic. And
denial face.
Oh yeah. And then like 3 weeks later, I had what my wife affectionately referred to as the night of the living dead. And that was after that night, she decided, she said, look, you've got to get help. And by that point, I was having anxiety attacks, panic attacks. I was depressed. I was a mess. And so this wonderful therapist introduced me to a 12-step recovery community that was there to help me and define sobriety, and introduced me to the 12 steps for the first time. And I've seen so much remarkable, miraculous transformations take place in people's lives as a direct result of working those steps. And I just felt like, why hasn't someone democratized these, right? Because even the guy who wrote them said, these would benefit anybody. Like just to live according to this design for living would help anybody. And I'm like, nobody's actually shown other people how to do this. And I'm like, it's time. And I want to be the guy who does it.
Cool.
No,
What can you, so for people, I mean, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I think there's a bunch of people that probably don't know what the 12 steps, I mean, they probably heard of it, but they don't know what they are. So can you sort of quickly outline what those are?
Yeah. So let's begin, if it's okay with you, by like, let's just define an addiction. And I'm going to be curious to do this with you guys because you're physicians. And I'm like, all right, let's just talk about what an addiction is. Well, let's just begin by saying it's insanely complicated, right? Like addictions are not, you can't just point to one factor that, automatically, oh, that's the reason, right? There are social factors, familial factors, genetic factors, I think, neurological reasons that people become addicts or alcoholics or workaholics or overeaters or, there's such a wide range of addictions, right? That, and so for our purposes, I think an addiction is a unhealthy, compulsive relationship with a person, a behavior, or a substance that has mood-altering effects and negative consequences. And that's pretty simple, right? Like that seems to cover most addictions, right? And the founder of the man who wrote the 12 steps was a guy named Bill Wilson. And Wilson actually took them from a Christian organization called the Oxford Movement. They were only 6 steps. Then he sort of made them a little bit more granular, and then sought to have them be a program of recovery for people who, up to that point, were deemed hopeless. I mean, there was no hope for alcoholics before AA. None. Like people just either died in sanitariums, drank themselves to death, got wet brain, or whatever, and they just died. So the steps are really, really simple, but they're not easy. But the inner genius of it is just really amazing, right? Did you actually want me to go through them?
Sure. Let's do it.
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to do it really fast. Okay, for sake of
a quick
efficiency.
summary, right?
All right, so everybody get ready. Put your seatbelts on because I'm going fast. The first 3 have to do with really making peace or getting your relationship with God or your higher power straightened out, right? So number 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, and you can insert whatever your addiction is there if it's not alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. The second one is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Third is made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. So the first step is we got to get our relationship with a higher power straightened out, because up to this point, you have been your higher power, or your drug of choice has been your higher power. And we got to deal with that first, right? 4 through 7 are just about, let's get our relationship with ourselves straightened out, right? Mm-hmm. So 4 is made a decision to turn our will and made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. That's 4. So it's just a process of deep inner self-examination. 5 is admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. So coming out of hiding, right? Mm-hmm. 6 is we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And then 7 is humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. So all we're going to do is we're going to do a little self-examination, and we're going to just turn over to a higher power all the things, all the underlying causes and conditions of our addictions, right? And then 8 and 9 is, now that we've straightened out our relationship with God and with ourselves, now we got to straighten out our relationship with other people. Because usually, like nobody shows up in the rooms of recovery on a winning streak. You know what I'm saying? Nobody. And so usually there's some relational damage, right? That's happened. And all of us have this, right? 8 is made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And then 9 is made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Right. Mm-hmm. So we're just cleaning our side of the street. We're going to clean up our side of the street in terms of our relationships with other people. And then 10 through 12 is really just about how do I cultivate a lifestyle that supports health and growth in each of those 3 domains of our lives moving forward, right? So 10 is, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it, right? So it's just regularly looking inside and outside and saying, okay, am I moving through the world as a person that who's healthy, is able to own their stuff, and when we're wrong, we promptly admit it, right? Step 11 is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. And then the last step, which actually is the summary of the whole 12-step thing, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. Okay, now that's really right. We try to carry this message to alcoholics or to overeaters or to gambling addicts or to shopping addicts or to workaholics, whatever your thing is, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So the whole point, bottom line of the 12 steps is to facilitate a spiritual awakening of sufficient force that it renders your need for an addictive substance behavior or relationship unnecessary. So that's it.
That just sounds like the summary of the need for God in our life, period. Forget all the other, the substance, all the struggles we have, the sin, the addictions or not. I mean,
yeah, well, what's really interesting, I heard an interview with John Crist, the comedian. He was on Sean Ryan's show a few months ago, and he talked about how he had a drinking problem and he went to rehab, and it may not have been super bad, but he's just like, okay, I want to get control of this. And he said, everyone should go to rehab because the drinking part was not that big of a deal for him, but everything else he learned about himself, his life, his relationships, et cetera, he said was so amazing. He's like, everybody should do this.
Yes.
Well, now you've created a resource so everyone can do this without necessarily spending 10 grand in, going to the Sierra Nevadas. And
yeah. Well, I mean, listen, first of all, I kind of think everybody's an addict, right? I mean, I think human beings are wired for addictions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of the way our brain is set up, right? We have reward centers and dopamine. And once you kick that thing into gear, the brain starts to go, hey, I want to do that again, right? And then we get into a loop. We get into an uninterrupted circuit of self-destruction, right? For some people, they're on the low end of the continuum. Maybe it's, you're a soccer mom and you're addicted to people pleasing, you're a codependent, but it's not fatal per se, although it could make you pretty damn miserable to other people, and your life could become unmanageable. All the way up to, if you're a meth addict, you're talking about a different level of lethality, right? And so you that requires an intervention that's a little bit more serious and time critical. So, but I just think all human beings need a program for living, a spiritual program for living, and this is a really, really, really good one. And so, if your listener can identify as an alcoholic or addict, I urge you, go get help and start working a 12-step program. But even if you're not, this program is for you. Like it's just a great program for living a life based on spiritual principles.
So where were you at in your career at the time that you were going through this? You were an Episcopal priest at that time, were you?
Not at 27. No. Now relapse is part of my story, and I talk about it in the book. The book is very vulnerable and transparent. So in 2020, after multiple decades of not drinking, right, I went out on prescription medications, not opioids, but specifically on Adderall, Klonopin, and Xanax. And because I have, an addictive, a history of addiction, some people can use that kind of stuff and just follow the directions. But then guys like me come along and it's like, oh,
whoever prescribed all that might not have dug deep into your history of
yes, yeah, that's well, and I was pretty good at not mentioning it. So whatever. So anyway, I'm very honest in the book about my own journey because as I say, I'm at a point in my life journey where telling the truth is really important, right? Like let me just, because my life has been dedicated to wanting to improve and deepen people's lives through exposing them to ideas and experiences they would not find elsewhere necessarily. So, I mean, how can I talk about the 12 steps theoretically when I really actually need to talk about them through the lens of my own experience, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I'm wicked open in this book. I mean, I spent a bunch of sleepless months going, really, are you sure? You sure you want to do that? And I'm like, I don't know how else to do it.
Being vulnerable like that is, man, it feels like a double-edged sword, right? Because I think we're created for relationship, where our experiences are there to share with other people to help. This is what life is about, is helping other people walk through the same crap that we've dealt with and learned from. Yet, yeah, there's still, I think, just knowing my personal story, but I think I could speak to a lot of people, is that sometimes some stuff you're ready to share, obviously, because it's enough in the past, or you've dealt with it and worked through it, and other stuff is just still too fresh. So,
yeah, well, this goes back to 2020,
right.
And so I gave it sufficient time, I felt, to, and then that lump in the throat comes as an author, and you're like, okay, I know what that lump means. That lump means I got to talk about this. And so I don't have any regrets about it.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about everyone's an addict. And I think one of the best descriptions I ever heard was, there was a friend I made when we first moved to Oregon. So this is over 30 years, or around 30 years ago. And he was an excellent skier. And he was an alcoholic. He was sober for several years by this point. But the way he dealt with it was, he would fly fish 100 days a year and ski 100 days a year. Yeah. And he said, I realized that I have to play with the toy till it's broken. And I was like, that is, and he was a really simple guy, construction worker, not formally educated. And I was like, that is so profound. I have to play with the toy till it's broken. Yep. And so even Alice Cooper, through his recovery, which was spiritually amazing, like he's laying in bed almost dead. His wife has left him. She eventually came back. They've been married, almost 45 years or something now. And he's just like, has a spiritual transformation. He says, Jesus, if you can create the world, you can keep Alice Cooper from doing drugs and drinking. But he still started golfing. So in those times where, because normally before sound check, he'd get up, do whatever, and he would have 4 or 5 hours to do nothing. And he would just sit there and drink and watch TV all day. He's like, well, what am I going to do now? I got to fill this time, or, the devil's going to come back. So he started golfing. And he became this expert golfer, which is just so wild to think of.
Yeah. I mean, listen, he could do worse. Right. And, yes. I think the thing that you actually said earlier, though, is the key, right? Which is the spiritual component, right? Golf is a nice supportive activity, but the real thing he had to figure out was, who's in charge here? Mm-hmm. Like, who's driving the bus? Because every time I drive the bus, we're going to have accidents. Right. But so somebody, the key is, as my sponsor, I have a great sponsor in my program, and a sponsor is just a mentor who helps people along in their journey of recovery, right? Walks them through the steps, et cetera, offers counsel. This guy's awesome. He said, he'll say things to me like, Ian, we are well past any conversation about you fixing you. And I'm like, you're pretty right on that, right? And it's like, I had to, we all have to reach a point in our lives, and sometimes several times, when we realize that, when we're at the wheel, weird things happen. We do weird things. And when God is at the wheel, then you have a much higher probability of a good life that will be of benefit, not just to you, but to all those people around you.
Well, it's interesting because it reminds me of the Eugene Peterson quote. I think it's in the somewhere in the Message Bible. I can't remember what verse it was, but his paraphrase was, "Self-help is no help at all."
Yeah,
and it's just so profound.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and yet we have a multi-billion-dollar industry of self-help, right? And I love what one commentator said. He said, who got rich off of Tony Robbins' books? Tony Robbins.
Yep. Yeah. And, here's the thing, right? Like, there's actually a quote in my book where I say, the 12 steps are not a self-help program, because if yourself could have helped you by now, wouldn't yourself have already done it? Like,
Exactly.
what are you doing in the self-help aisle if yourself could have helped you? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And so that's another thing I love about the 12 steps, right? Is it says, listen, you need a higher power. And the only qualification that higher power needs is it can't be you. Like, it's got to stop being you. It has to be someone outside of you who actually is worth following and organizing your life around.
So, what would you say is your experience personally being in this, being with others, and then just studying the 12 steps and being a therapist? Is there certain steps that people get hung up on the most? Does it just widely vary depending on the person? Because I'm thinking I know what would be the answer for me, or guessing, but is there anything common in that or not?
So every step has its own challenges, right? And some people get stuck up on the first step. We admitted we were powerless. It can take people a long time before they finally go, when I drink, I can't stop. That's a problem. You know what I mean? Like, I'm powerless over what I do once I start, right? Like, it's just, it's game on. And that, or some people will say, well, on the second half of the first step, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. Well, people will say, well, I still got 2 cars in the garage. I got a house. I got a job. Yeah, sure, I drink too much, blah, blah, blah. But my life's not unmanageable. And I'm like, well, we can unpack unmanageability in a lot of different ways, right? Sometimes I just say to people, all right, well, how about intolerable? You know what I mean? Like, your life is just intolerable. Or, and unmanageability can manifest itself in many, many different ways besides having economic implications, right? Some people get really stuck on step 3. We turned our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. A lot of people come into 12-step programs as atheists or agnostics, and they're like, I can't do the whole God thing. And I'm like, all right, well, up until now, you've had a God, right? It's called alcohol. Or it was drugs, or it was, love relationships, right? Or like being a codependent, or it was food, or it, whatever your thing is, or it was work, or the list goes on and on and on. So you've already had a higher power. So let's move past that idea that you can't accept God, because you've had one, all along.
Yeah, perfect.
People get stuck on 8 and 9 too, right? Having to make a list of people they've harmed and then going out and making amends. So it just depends on the person, but they're like I said, they're simple, but they're not easy.
Well, right. It's like weight loss. Move your body more and eat less calories.
Yeah, that's basically let's make that a book.
Yeah.
How to lose weight, eat less, exercise more.
Yeah. Shut your mouth and run. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's like
Shut your mouth.
people are like, yeah, obesity runs in my family, and it's like, no, the problem is nobody runs in your family. That's the problem.
Yes, we've all seen that joke. It's an old joke, anyway.
But it's a good joke. It's a good joke. So, that's
so the obvious. So the showing up, doing the work, working through the steps is a process. Is there like an average time that people kind of get through this in a typical 12-step program? Is it just really across the board? Some people sail through and they're at step 10 in a year. Other people are still struggling at 5 years in. Obviously, there's people slide back and relapse, but is it just so widely varied? It just depends.
It's pretty varied, but I would say that, a good sponsor wants to move somebody through the steps as quickly as they possibly can. And actually in the early days of AA, they actually used to do it in like a day or 2. Right. Like in the earliest days. Yeah. I mean, it was like but they would literally have a guy in the house and they would just, in bad shape, and they would walk them through the steps. And a lot of people got sober that way and stayed sober that way. So it doesn't have to be a long, laborious process, but, different people take different amounts of time. Different people get hung up in different spots. But we do encourage people to move through it. Now, to be clear, the steps aren't just something you do once. Like Actually,
No.
the steps are something you do every day.
Yes.
And, to give you an example, let's say you're a parent of a kid and you're all codependent and enmeshed in this kid's life, right? Maybe Billy's got a drug problem or a drinking problem, or just is making bad decisions. Okay, who knows? And you're a codependent mom who's in the car and you're going out of your mind, right? And you're going to Al-Anon or Codependence Anonymous, and you're like, okay, my life is unmanageable, right? It's emotionally unmanageable right now because I'm freaked out about my kid. I can't stop thinking about him or her. And I'm always trying to control them and tell them what to do. And they won't talk to me now. We're estranged, blah, blah, blah. But I'm anxious all the time about it. And then you go, okay, well, what do I do? Well, it's time for me to do a step one. I admit that I am powerless over Billy and that my life is now unmanageable because of my feelings about Billy, right? And then I do step two, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. Because frankly, I'm out of my mind right now, right? I'm a nutcase. And then step three is, okay, I'm going to turn my will in my life, and Billy, over to the care of God as I understand him. Let him take the wheel in this situation. And I'm going to stop being a controlling, hovering parent, enabling Billy's problems and fixing him and blah, blah, blah. So that's just an example of how you could work the steps every single day. And, I work step 10 all the time when I got to go apologize to my wife for being sharp in the kitchen, or I got to go and if I'm acting out in a way I don't like, and then I got to do maybe an inventory of myself and then admit to somebody else my problem with whatever it is. Right. So like my sponsor says, when you work the steps long enough, eventually the numbers fall away and you just know them so well that you're just drawing on their wisdom 24/7.
Which really sounds like the Christian walk of life. So, which brings me to my next, not question, but so in your book, like, well, how do you sort of mesh the spiritual, psychological 12 steps together? I mean, obviously, I see so much of that as just the daily Christian walk.
Yes.
What do you say?
Well, number one, thank you for mentioning that. I'm often telling anxious Christians who are just so suspicious of anything that's not coming directly from their pastor or church or the Bible. And I'm like, listen, the 12 steps are the gospel in miniature. Like it's just the gospel. Like if you read the Bible, there's nothing in the 12 steps that is going to make you go, oh, not for me. Like if you have that action, if you have that reaction, you and I are reading two different Bibles, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's just, let's get right with God. Let's get right with ourselves. Let's get right with others. And then let's organize our lives around doing that every day. Right. That's all it is. And, but most people don't have a plan. Like if you ask most people in a church, can you please tell me your plan for spiritual transformation? They'd be like, well, I go to church and I read the Bible from time to time. I got a small group, but I don't really have a plan. It's just like this vague path. Right. And I think they just spin in this little whirlpool, this eddy of just doing enough to get by, but never really growing, And the 12 steps it's just a great plan, right? For like, how do I do life? Well, here you go. This is how you do life. And, how do I navigate the spiritual and the psychological? Well, I just got a review last night in Booklist, and Booklist is the big trade publication for libraries, and libraries are ordering books and sometimes retailers. I got a great review. I was so pleased. And what I was really pleased about is that they said that this was a really good book for anybody, regardless of their spiritual orientation. Now, a Christian reading this book would say, it's clear Ian's a Christian. So I feel good about that, right? But a person who's not yet, would not identify that way yet, would say, well, it's clear he's a Christian, but he sounds like a decent guy who's open-minded, and is just trying to help me find some peace in my life. So that's kind of how I navigated it. And I'm glad that it landed that way, at least with Booklist.
Oh, no, that's great.
I love it because, I guess from my point of view, there's so many times when you're trying to reach others to bring them to Christianity. That's the goal. But if you can do it in a way that's not threatening by pushing or it feels like you're pushing a bunch of religious stuff that scares people away, then they're more open-minded about reading it. Yeah. And then picking up on that and hopefully growing.
But if you go back to got the stories in the gospel, the interaction that Christ had with people, they always came with their brokenness.
Mm-hmm.
And their brokenness they were differently broken. I mean, there was the woman with the issue of blood, there was the man born blind, there was the paralytic next to the pool of Bethesda, there was, like, on and on and on. They were all broken. They were all broken differently. They didn't come to, the only people that came to Jesus with deep theological questions were the hypocrites. So, which is fascinating. So trying to you meet people in their brokenness. That's how Christ meets people. It's clear. It's obvious. Yeah. It's the entire gospel. Yeah. He doesn't meet you in your head scratching, queries necessarily. Not that he can't, but I mean, it's back to C.S. Lewis. God whispers in my pleasures and he screams in my pain. And so what an avenue. I mean, that's the avenue. I mean, the great physician, the healer, it's Jesus. It's through your brokenness that, the greatest healing, the greatest renewal is going to happen. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think the other reason the book I'm pleased with it is, most books on recovery are really glum. They're really, there's not a lot about, and I get it. At one level I get it, because for some people it's a matter of life or death, right? So you got to be serious, right? On the other hand, one of the reasons I enjoyed the book is there's enough humor in it and stories in it and lightness in it. It doesn't at any point trivialize the importance of the journey. At the same time, it says there's some joy and laughter on the journey as well. And if there isn't, then maybe something's wrong. I think it's really important that the book is, it has a kind of my sort of signature Irish Catholic snarky side comes out periodically, and so if you like that kind of humor, it's definitely laced with it.
But that resonates with me, because you're right. Nothing's more tough to get through than sometimes these deep, serious tomes that read more like textbooks that are important information, but yet, I don't know, I always feel more inspired and uplifted by the aspects in life that we can sort of laugh about ourselves and share and be self-facing. And
it's narrative, right?
Yes.
It's why Jesus spoke in parables, because people can relate to narratives. And you listen to Jordan Peterson, and it's like, no. It's what's the narrative? That's the key. But he says it in kind of a squeaky Canadian voice, which is way more powerful, I think.
So your book is, I know I have to admit, I haven't read it. I'm going to dive in because.
Well, it's not up till the 28th of January.
Good point.
But you can pre-order now.
There you go.
Said the sales guy.
Right.
Absolutely.
What I was thinking is, so you're writing about your experiences. How much professional anecdotes and what you've learned and gleaned through your careers as therapist as well as priest kind of goes in there? So is there other people's are you sharing anything else from any of the work you've done professionally, or is it just all personal?
It's a mix of both. So there are stories about plenty of other people. Obviously they've been, I've made them anonymous. I've conflated them so nobody could be identified. But there are plenty of moving stories and funny stories from other people's lives. This, wisdom from my sponsors in there all over the place. His funny stories and wise stories, I might add. And so, I've really spent my whole life trying to understand the inner world of other people, and help them understand their inner world so that they can move through life with more emotional wisdom and with more spiritual acuity, right? Just smartness. And so, I'm by nature a storyteller. That's, I think, my Irish side, right? I just love a good story. And so the book is teeming with those.
Perfect. I love it.
It's great.
So I like the part in the title where it says it mentions the well-adjusted, and not just the down and out. So
the seemingly well-adjusted.
So let's talk about that, because I think this is kind of cool how it can pertain to anyone, right?
Absolutely. And so the 12 steps are for everybody. In fact, Bill Wilson, who wrote them, said everybody should follow these steps, right? And if they did, they would derive the same kind of life transformation that people who are alcoholics do, or drug addicts, or food addicts, or whatever your thing is. So if a person doesn't identify as an addict, this book is for you, right? If you're a person sitting in rehab and you're just getting clean and you're trying to figure out what's next, this book is for you. And if you're somewhere in between all that, great, it's for you. So that was the thing that excited me most, was how do I make this accessible to everybody? Because there is this really weird distinction people make in their heads, right? There are those people, right? Like, and then there's us. There are those abnormal addicts, alcoholics, or foodaholics, or whatever. And then there's us. And I'm like, that's just not actually how it goes, right? Like, there's just us. That's it. And there are different manifestations of us. It may look different on you than it does on me, but we're all struggling and we all need a plan. And here it is, right? It's interesting, and you guys will appreciate this. I haven't said this on another show, so whatever. But the only people who look at me with these sort of sad eyes or with like disappointment are Christians. They're the only ones who go, "Oh, I'll pray for you," or "I'm kind of disappointed this happened to you." And I'm like, "Really? Are you reading the same book I'm reading?" Like we're
stopping them. Like, aren't you a human being too? Like,
yeah.
hello.
I'm like, if you're reading the same book I'm reading, then and I know that you are as screwed up as I am. Exactly. I don't know why we now have hierarchies of screwed up, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. I have a friend of mine I talk about in the book, and I say his name is Gene, but that's actually just a pseudonym. And Gene was the pastor of a large evangelical congregation. And he also had a secret drinking problem. And he's not the first guy I met in that category. And he ended up showing up one Sunday drunk and to church. And he starts to give his sermon, and the elders realize, this dude is sozzled. And they're like, we got to do something. So they escort him out of the sanctuary. And rather than get the guy help, which is what they should have done, right? What they should have done is read the Bible and go, oh, guess what? This is one of those things that humans do, right? And so we ought to really help this guy. Let's get
brotherly love. Yes.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah. What do? They fired him, right? They just showed him the door, right? Like within a week, left him on his own. Well, he goes to rehab. He ends up in the rooms of recovery. And one day we're in the basement of a church, and he looks at me and he says, Ian, it's really weird. I've experienced more grace, acceptance, love, forgiveness, kindness here in the basement of churches more than I ever experienced it upstairs. Like, why is that possible? And I'm like, another reason I was excited to write the book is, do you all know what's happening in your basement? Like those guys you complain about because they smoke in your parking lot and you think that's offensive? Like really, like, you need to go downstairs and check out the miracles that are happening on a regular basis in people's lives. Like, well,
and I'm thinking not just the miracles, but what you said. I mean, it happened in our own family. That Christians can be the worst for turning, like calling out sin, but just leaving somebody high and dry. Whereas others working through life, struggling, knowing that we all struggle with stuff, are more accepting and there to help and pick up the pieces.
But you think of that pastor, if they would have got him help, and if he would have come out and shared his brokenness in a humbling way, not a humiliating way, a humbling way, how many more people would he have helped? And the thing is, he would have helped his church, because the trifling religious people would have all got pissed off and left, which would be great, because then you wouldn't have to deal with them as a pastor. And everyone else that needed help would be so relieved. It was like, air going out of the room. We used to go to a church, and they had to have Saturday night services because everybody was too hungover on Sunday morning. I mean, that was the congregation that they were dealing with. So they built this massive, deliverance ministry out of just speaking to people where they were, and where they were was at the bar. Yeah. And it was powerful. I mean, unbelievably powerful.
Yeah. I love that. And that's why I've learned in many ways, and I'm a pastor and I'm a priest and I love my church and I'm so whatever. I'm just saying I've learned more about what church is in the basement of churches than I ever did upstairs or in seminary. Like I've just learned more about healing community from the craziest people. And some of them are out of their minds. And they just say stuff. People say stuff all the time. We're like, okay, the other day I'm in a meeting and somebody's sharing about something they're scared of, a decision they're having to make, and they're just sharing it with the group, right? And this 19-year-old kid who's been sober for like 20 minutes, right? Like he's in the room and he looks at the guy and he asks this question. He goes, okay, so you're confused about what to do. He goes, well, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And the guy went, what? He goes, well, what would you do if you weren't afraid? He said, I guess I would go and talk to that person and just be honest. He goes, okay, well, go do that and see what happens. And I thought, I just, all I had to do, that cost me $1.
No,
they pass a basket.
Wow.
It's $1.
Wow. No kidding.
No, there's a couple of things. There's something that always bugged me about recovery, which was, I'm a recovering alcoholic. Okay, fine. You haven't drank for 40 years. I think you're over it by now. I mean, that was kind of where my head went. But then when you go back to the beginning, I'm powerless. I have to give my power to God. There's a couple things. Yeah, maybe you will never drink again and is gone. But there's still other addictions that are going to be there that are going to show up. And the other thing is, you can't go into changing your life and not understand that it's your whole life for the rest of your life, which That's just right. really hit me during this conversation, right? It's like going on a diet. The problem with going on a diet is you go off a diet. It's like going on vacation. Well, vacation and retirement are very different. People that live retirement like vacation are pretty miserable people. They last 2 or 3 months and they're like, this is awful. Yep. And so, yeah, May's trying to learn that. But I mean, it's so that whole, we're all recovering. That's the point. We're all recovering from something.
Yes.
And you're either a slave to it or you're recovering from it. You only get, it's binary. It's two choices.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, let's just name a couple of universal human addictions, right? How about the universal human addiction to control?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like not living a surrendered life, but needing to be in control and coming up with either being a bully or being passive and controlling people through passivity, right? Which happens a lot.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or, how about the universal human addiction to playing God? Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That sounds pretty common.
Right.
So if you're struggling with either of those things, you could really benefit from the 12 steps, right? Because it actually deals with what the 12 steps do in part is they compassionately puncture the human ego and right size it. Right.
Ooh,
and so now you're no longer in this role of creator, which by the way, is so anxiety producing. It's ridiculous, right?
Yes.
You're no longer the creator. You get to be a creation again. And that's part of what the steps do, right? It's like, all right, let's right size this dude. And it's not cut them down to size and stuff like that. It's like, no, let's get a nice pack on the ego here and get it down to size. Because when the ego's in charge, you're miserable.
Yes. There's so much pressure.
Oh my gosh, it's hard.
Right? Yes. I know. I love that.
Yeah. So it's nice to get up in the morning and realize you're not in charge. Some days it's frustrating because you think you have a better plan than God does. But, you learn how to stop giving God orders and you just learn to do life on life's terms. And to your point too, it's like with, going to meetings forever, right? For the rest of your life. Well, first of all, they're fun. They're really enjoyable. So to me, it's not like a misery making deal, right? and like I said, it only cost me $1 to get the kind of wisdom I get in there from the strangest of sources, right? I mean, I leave there all the time, like writing in my journal furiously, like, oh my gosh, this guy said this. And I was like, I got to remember to ask my clients who pay me a lot of money that question about fear. You know what I mean? Like, and then, the problem with human beings is you can fill us up with good stuff, but we leak. We forget stuff all the time. Like we have to be reminded. We need a community where we keep going back. And in fact, a friend of mine yesterday, I was on a podcast interview, and this woman, Molly Stillman, said to me, she said, when I was a kid, both my parents were in AA. So I went to meetings with my parents when I was little. And at the end of meetings, what happens is we say the Lord's Prayer, and then people usually say something like, keep coming back. It works if you work it. Right. And she went to a Catholic mass. She wasn't a church kid. So she goes to mass, and they do the Lord's Prayer. And she's so excited. She's like 10 years old because she knows the Lord's Prayer. She doesn't know any other prayers, but she now can join the congregation. So she says the prayer. And then at the end of it, she grabs people's hands next to her and she goes, keep coming back. It works if you work it.
I love it.
That's perfect.
And I thought, why don't we do that in church? Right? Why don't we, at the end of every service, we go, keep coming back. It works if you work it. It's like,
Yes. That childlike innocence is so awesome. That's what we need more of. Okay, we have to segue into the Enneagram part because as a longtime fan of your work, I want to know. So how do you see the connections between Enneagram types and then people in the 12-step program? I mean, is there any help in understanding your Enneagram type to sort of navigate that, or is that just sort of a separate thing to help you figure out life? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that can be integrated. To be clear, people ask me all the time, like, are certain Enneagram types more susceptible to, addictions? And I'm like, I meet people in the rooms of recovery or who are working on themselves as regards addictions of every single type, right? Because any type can be codependent, any type can be addicted, any type can, I've met them all, right?
Right.
Now, one of the benefits of knowing the Enneagram, and when I'm working with sponsees, I eventually get them to do the Enneagram because a little self-knowledge, self-knowledge won't keep you sober, but it won't hurt you either, right? Like it is going to help, right?
Well, at least it can explain. And for me, even just doing that Enneagram work, going through your books, and it was like a light bulb aha moment of, it allowed me to have some grace for myself and help explain some of the harshness that I would take out, on Tim or family. And it would help explain at least some of the actions, which then would help me kind of go forward maybe and figure out how to change. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a great support tool on the journey of recovery. It's not going to be the thing that is going to lead the pack in terms of, getting you sober, right? Because you can have a lot of as my friend Richard Rohr likes to say, information is not transformation.
Right.
And oftentimes even in the church, right? Like people want to talk about theology all the time, and I love theology, so don't get me wrong. But information is not transformation. It just isn't. And we confuse it. We think, well, if I just have a lot of Bible information or theological information, that's the same thing as maturity or spirituality. It's not the same thing. No. So, in fact, I know plenty of people who know a lot about the Bible. They have a lot of information, but they have zero wisdom.
Yes.
Right? Those are two different animals.
Well,
right?
And the reverse, like some of the most sage and amazing wisdom I'm like, wow, this person seems not very learned in some things and simple, but that's such amazing advice and wisdom from someone I wouldn't expect. So
of course.
The thing that really gets me about this is, you need two things. You need at least two things. You need a plan. People will plan their vacation more than they'll plan their spiritual journey, even though they may go to church 3 times a week. And you need a community, because that's really what this centers around. You can work the 12 steps, but if you don't do it in community, you're not really doing it at all. I mean, it's sort of mental ascension, and a lot of it is just personal. The first 3 steps may be more just about you, but then how you reinforce that is the fact that you get into community with other broken people. And I think, but how about this one? How different would the church be en masse if we understood that the reason we're there is because of brokenness, not because of righteousness or theology or whatever? Because really what brings people into, AA or NA or whatever it may be, is they're united by their brokenness. Not that they're celebrating their brokenness, by no means. They want to escape it. But you escape that through this community And through working the system, and I've said this so many times, especially about diet and exercise, ritual is what saves you. You get up, you take a shower, you brush your teeth, you go to work. You go to the gym, your life changes. It just becomes part of the ritual.
Yeah.
You work the 12 steps. It becomes part of the ritual, part of the, mantra, so to speak. And then 6 months later, your life's way different. Well, why? Because you work the system.
Yeah. And I would say that you can read this book and do the workbook by yourself and you'll derive some benefit. However, when you're doing it in a community, it accelerates it dramatically, right? Growth and change dramatically. And so, because here's the deal. Most of us get sick alone and we get well together. That's just a mantra I have, right? We tend to get sick by ourselves and we get well together. Like here's a very interesting thing. You ever seen a beer commercial where it's just one guy alone in a room drinking a 6-pack, watching TV? And he's eating a bag of chips and he's got a 6-pack next to him and he's just drinking by himself, like watching TV. Well, that's how a lot of people drink, right? I mean, that's that's how people, no, what they're showing you is people having a really good time in community at bars, dancing, laughing, being together, making memories, right?
Exactly.
And so there's actually, there's a little bit of manipulation going on there, right? It's like, if I drink, I will find friends and have fun and memories, right? So that's the manipulation. And it's actually just not the truth of how most people drink, right? At the same time, the genius of it is that is how you get well. You are in community, you are laughing, you are sharing deep stuff about your own life, you're carrying each other's burdens. So one of the things I did is I did have a workbook I wrote that comes with the book if you choose to get it. And you can just get, if you're not ready to say, I can identify an addiction that has a 12-step group to help me, you can just go get 4 or 5 friends and spend 12 weeks on my workbook and go through it together and have a community and do the work.
Sounds like a perfect small group
study
activity.
Great.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. As long as everybody's willing to go there.
Yeah. That's the thing.
Everybody's got to be. But you know what? That's actually not even true because I go to meetings all the time and there are people who come in with all kinds of objections and they're not, everyone comes in at a different level of willingness to do the work, right? And you accept the ones that aren't yet willing as much as you do the ones that are willing and, and everything works out fine.
Yeah, because that's humanity. Yep. That's the way it works.
So speaking of Enneagram types, just for fun, can you share your Enneagram type with our audience? And of course, I'm going to ask you what you asked us. What's your type and what do you love and what do you hate about being that type?
Yeah, I'm an Enneagram 4, the individualist, and my core unconscious motivation is a need to be special and unique. We are disproportionately represented in the creative fields, though not all 4s are artists, but many are. Mm-hmm. I'm an artist. I write books. I write songs. That's what I do. We're very good at empathy. That's one of our really big kind of gifts, So you can show up in my house and you could tell me, I've done this, I've done that, I feel this, I think that, and I just go, oh, okay. Or you could break down in tears in front of me and I'm like, okay, we can do this. It's like, empathy just comes easy for me. And I think that's maybe why some of my books work, right? Because I just have a lot of empathy for people reading them. Like I honestly feel like if you don't love your readers, then you don't have much to say to them. Like if you don't have empathy for their life situation, then you don't have much to say. Anyhow, so there's a lot I love about being a 4. I see the world in artistic categories. I'm pretty good at saying clearly what others feel vaguely in songs and books. And, I care deeply about, facilitating experiences for people that bring about deep, rich transformation. Like I care about the inner world of other people, right? I don't really care about making a lot of money. I mean, I like money, but it's not like, I'm not like, well, I need to have money. That's not what gets me excited. What gets me excited is watching people be deeply moved and changed, And so I love that about my type. What do I dislike about my type? Oh, my Lord. Well, when we're not very healthy, we are self-absorbed, melancholy, envious of other people, walking around with addicted to our own suffering and our past, all that stuff. I've outgrown some of that stuff, right? I've outgrown some of that stuff, but periodically it raises its head a little bit and goes, still here, still here. And so fours are complicated. It's a very complicated type as compared to other types. We can be as much a mystery to ourselves as we are to other people at times.
That, I think, the fours I know, I think that's a real good summation. As much a mystery to themselves as to others.
Yeah.
Which is
Got me thinking now. Tim was giving me the look here when you were talking about
I think we know what you are.
Anyway. Okay. I have to go down, since you're an artist, this is just for fun. If the 12 steps were a playlist, what would the first song be?
Well, maybe I should have gotten those questions beforehand.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Say that again.
I think I know what it is, but if the 12 steps were a playlist of songs, what would the first song be?
Oh my gosh.
It came to me when we were talking about it.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'm going to wing this. Are you ready?
Uh-huh.
All right. Do you know the song "Let's Go Crazy" by Prince?
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I love that song. Right. And he opens it up and saying, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to get through this thing called life."
Perfect.
Well, I picked "Crazy Train."
Oh, nice.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, nice. I guess maybe I wasn't on the first one.
What
an addict. Take the wheel by Carrie.
Oh, another great one.
Yes.
Yeah. But
yes.
That exactly. That's fun. That's a great discussion starter.
Oh man,
bringing the art
is really good.
But it's interesting because in some writing,
what's that?
Some writing I've done, I talked about this one article I wrote for our blog, and I said, if you want to know. If you really want to answer deeper questions, don't ask scientists, ask artists, because they're going to get you something that you couldn't get otherwise.
Yeah. And, there's some truth to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Tim was talking about importance of ritual and daily habits to keep things going for you. Is there any one daily habit that you have that's made a big impact on, or that is really important to your life?
Yeah. Yes, there is. There's a couple actually, but I'll just give you the first one that comes to mind. I have a trainer that I meet with 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
So I work out 5 days a week. Doesn't look like it, but here I am. And 142 pounds of taut. And
love it. Mean fighting machine.
Yeah, what's so funny though is I took this up a little bit later in life, and what happened is I've always been such a heart brain guy, like thinky, feely person. Mm-hmm. And when I finally got in touch with my body, I was like, oh my gosh, there's a whole other aspect to me I never really appreciated. And now, like, I can't imagine what life would be like if I didn't meet with my crazy Juan Carlos, who's my trainer. And he beats the bejesus out of me every day, 5 days a week anyway. And what you were saying earlier, right? It's like you create a ritual and then 6 months later you wake up and you're like, I'm a different person, and that's what happened to me when we started a couple of years ago. And my wife is a big exercise, health, diet, not a dieter, she's 61 years old and she still has a six pack. She was a downhill racer. She has a six pack. It's the weirdest thing to see a 62-year-old woman with a six pack, actually. And, but she's hot yoga 5 days a week and, runs and does stuff. And so eating and exercise and all that stuff brings us a lot of joy. And it's actually supports my recovery, right? Because I have to have, I got to watch over my physical, my emotional, my spiritual, my intellectual, my everything life. I'm always monitoring it to make sure I'm paying enough attention to these different areas. Absolutely.
Typology podcast. How I'm thinking how many episodes you are in. How many years has it been going?
Gosh, 6 years anyway, 7 years. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
A lot. And we've done probably 300 shows, I guess. I mean, something like that. And it's a super fun show. I mean, in the sense that, we get to explore different types by interviewing people of that type, right?
Right.
And they do a much better job of explaining their world and their experience and how to relate to them than I could ever do just describing it,
Right.
So, and they're fun conversations and it's full of laughter, and sometimes they turn into therapy sessions, and that's always interesting. And
Yes. I must say,
it's good.
I felt that, which I needed at the time when we were on the show. Felt very vulnerable, and I was like, whew.
Well, but what
But
was,
I probably need a lot of therapy.
but here's an interesting story. So we were on your show, and then we had a listener email us.
Oh yes.
And this is a great story. So this is a woman that I had worked with when I was working for Youth for Christ in Winnipeg at camps. This was 35, almost 40 years ago. And she's an Enneagram counselor and listens to your show regularly. And she hears, Tim and May Hindmarsh. And she said, I almost drove into oncoming traffic. Because she's like, what? I know who that guy is. And not only did she remember who I was, she had used sort of the archetype of who I was 35 years ago as the example of a 7.
Funny.
And I'm like,
perfect.
wow.
He's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect 7.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for being here. I want you to, I'll let you share where people can find your book when it comes out. Is Amazon, I'm assuming, and anywhere else, and what social handles you have where people can follow and find you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. If this show drops before January 28th, which is the official release date, people can pre-order the book now on Amazon. And if they do, they get the lowest price when it comes out, whatever that price is. Yeah. And then it's available on Audible and Kindle and all those things. I actually just read the audiobook for the last 3 days. So, so that's done. And in the can. So that's that they can pre-order now. I think if they go to my website, which is ianmorgancron.com/get-your-download, if they show proof that they've pre-ordered the book and they tell you how to do that, then they get the first chapter now, right? So they can actually just jump in and get a taste for what's coming when they get the book. And then social handles at Ian Morgan Cron, IANMORGANCRON, across all the different platforms. And if people I do, some limited coaching. And if people are interested in that, they can get a hold of Wendy at ianmorgancron.com and inquire there about it.
Wonderful. So can you expand a little bit on the coaching as far as coaching versus counseling?
Yes, and there is a difference. So I do what I call therapeutically informed coaching, right? I can't turn off my therapist's brain, and just but it's much more focused on very specific education and goals. It's like, okay, my goal is to get a new job and do this, but I'm an Enneagram 1, and what am I? It's like it's a lot more goal centered, but the conversations are kind of freewheeling and hopefully bring depth, and that they're additive to people's lives in a really good way. And of course I do a ton of corporate consulting, right? I just facilitate Enneagram workshops and then consult on staffing things, and many of my coaching clients actually come out of that, right? They're business. They're being coached in their professional roles. And so I do professional, like executive coaching as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, and that is super powerful.
Yes. Having
been in organizations and starting to, and understanding, like just kind of clicking through the 9 types and going, okay, I get it. This guy this guy isn't just a jerk. He sees the world entirely differently. And this is why. I mean, it really, I find it as a kind of a grace extension tool. It's really marvelous.
Yeah. In fact, I get clients often. I'll get a client because they're a very high performing, high ROI client, right? They actually make the company a lot of money, but they're just lacking any self-awareness. And because of that, they're just leaving bodies in their wake for whatever reason, right?
Uh-huh.
And if I can get in there and do some Enneagram coaching, it's really fun to be part of saving somebody's job, because they're reaching a point where it's like, is this guy worth all the money he makes? He's leaving such a mess here.
Right.
And I can just get in there and get under the hood with them and start coming up with different strategies for how they can be in the world. And it's amazing. Some of these people, they're really good people. They're just kind of lost, right? And they just need someone to come alongside them and go, okay, so here's why you're acting, thinking, and feeling that way. And maybe there's another way of looking at this that would help you to be more successful at work, you know? And it's fun to be able to be, you know, a contributor in that realm.
This has been amazing. Thank you again for joining us and being here, sharing and talking about your book and everything else that you're doing in your work. And I love the conversation, and we would love to have you back anytime. So
yeah, lots to talk about.
Yes, no kidding.
Yeah, lots to unpack, even though I hate that word with a passion. But it's just like, let's turn to God's word while we unpack his truths. And I'm like, okay, I'm leaving.
Yeah, that's it. You use the unpack word, I'm gone.
I'm gone. I'm out of here.
All right. Thanks again, Ian. And we'll put all the links in the show notes for our listeners. And it's been great.
Thanks, y'all. It was a blast.
Well, that was really fun and enlightening. And I really want to thank Ian for sharing his story and just all of his wisdom and insights. And I think his new book is really going to be, just like you said, an amazing tool for anybody, no matter where you're at in life, even if you don't identify yourself as having a true addiction. I think his point is that transformation is possible for anybody, no matter where you are in life. And we all have things that we need to work on.
Yeah, but strangely, because I'm a sick, twisted freak, stuck in my head is "Have a Drink on Me" by AC/DC. So.
Oh, is that right?
We should just change it. Don't have a drink on me. Oh, you can find all of his stuff at Amazon, and visit his website, ianmorgancron.com. That's very easy.
Yes, and that is Ian Morgan and then CRON.com. And then it also will have his link, the link to his podcast Typology, which I've been enjoying, and we were on as well. So if today's episode resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend. And speaking of friends, we have a community shout out as well again today. And we want to give a special shout out to Kristen Newman, who left a heartfelt comment on one of our social media posts. Your prayer and encouragement reminded us of why we do this work. And we are so grateful to have you in our community. And we so appreciate our community and do need reminding. And gratitude really helps keep us going. All right, everybody. So until next time.
Keep it BS free.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
But we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible. We can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.